David worked on a rotational basis and was on his way home from another rotation. He was very tired and asked his boss for 2 months off instead of 1. After all, David had done a pretty good job this time. He was working for 2. So he deserved to have some more time at home. His boss grumbled a little. He said he couldn't find an employee who could replace everyone, but he agreed. After all, it would be much worse if David did not rest properly and did not work to his full potential due to fatigue, or God forbid, got sick. It was hard to find specialists like David. David was very smart and he had golden hands. David's results have always been impressive. Reluctantly, the boss agreed to let David have 2 months off. The man wanted to tell his wife the good news, but changed his mind. He knew that Molly would beg him to go on a trip, but he wanted to relax at home. Then an idea popped into David's head. Why not tell his wife that he had quit? He had heard many stories of men who told their wives that they had lost their jobs, where they were making a lot of money, and then wives left them. He wanted to see what Molly's reaction would be. What if she was living with David just for his money? But he didn't want to believe it, since they had been together for 5 years, and the man hoped that their relationship was real, that it was built on true love. David decided he would make a joke, and when the vacation is over, he'd figure out how to explain everything to his wife, or just tell her the truth. He was sure she wouldn't be offended, especially since women often check on their husbands. David still could not forget how Molly checked David right before the wedding when she asked her attractive friend to seduce him. And after David had told her to go to hell, Molly showed up. She said with a smile that now she was completely confident in her husband. David still had an unpleasant feeling. He thought people should trust each other simply because they love each other. David considered his innocent joke to be more of a joke than a test because he was confident in his wife. When David returned home, he told his wife he was tired of the shift work and decided to quit his job. He told her that the money he earned was enough for at least 3 months of a comfortable life. So now he will get some rest and then he will look for a new job. At first, Molly became sad, to David's great surprise. But then she told that David made the right decision, and she is actually happy now that he will be with her. David felt like a liar. The man decided that he would get some rest and then decide what to do next. Maybe he really should look for a job in their city. After all, before the wedding, they discussed that David wouldn't work on a rotating basis all his life, and it was time to think about having kids. But so far, they still didn't think about having a baby. The couple was always happy together, and sometimes it seemed to David that his wife did not want to have kids. He was ready to put up with the situation, because if the wife didn't want to become a mother, then what was the point? And he didn't see himself becoming a father. Perhaps he was used to the lifestyle of being on the road all the time. Maybe if he found another job, his point of view would change. At first, Molly behaved differently than she had before. She took care of her husband, complimented him, made him delicious dinners, and offered the man a relaxing massage. Things became much better in their intimate life too. David felt that things had never been as good as they were now. Sometimes the man cursed himself for lying and really thought about looking for another job. If he found some decent one, he would definitely quit and spend more time with his wife. But all of the jobs were unsuitable and the wages they offered were ridiculous. It just wasn't enough for a comfortable life. David began to work on a rotating basis after college, and he was happy that he earned a lot of money. And then he could rest for a month. He began to think about how he could tell his wife that he was going to work the same job. After all, he had to provide for his wife. He began to notice that his wife was sad, and when he tried to talk to her, she would start to grumble and say that everything was fine. David never had a chance to talk about his bad joke. His wife was always pleasing him with something, spoiling him, and he simply could not find the right words. But the man did not want to keep lying. He wanted to say that he had decided to go back to work. He cursed himself for lying. He felt like a child who was hiding the truth from his parents. All this week, David had been feeling very tired. He was sleepy all the time. He didn't even remember how he spent evenings. And when he woke up, his happy wife was smiling at him, and he could not dare to tell her the truth. One night, David was ready to talk to Molly and confess that he had lied to her, that he wanted to check her and it was just a bad joke. But it turned out he had deceived her and played with her feelings. While Molly cooked dinner and served the table, David tried to pull himself together. The man headed to the kitchen and stopped for a while around the corner, hesitating to start a serious conversation. But suddenly, he saw his wife putting something in his tea. Was this some remedy to improve his potency? Probably not, because David didn't have any problems with potency. David frowned and hid. Molly glanced around cautiously and put some more powder in the mug. With a smile on her face, the woman placed the mug in the corner of the table where David usually sat. Maybe she decided to poison me, thinking she didn't need such a useless husband anymore. An absurd thought popped in his head. David decided to pretend he didn't see anything. But now, he decided to postpone the conversation about his bad joke. Molly called him to dinner, and while she was washing her face in the bathroom, he quickly poured the tea into the sink, washed the mug, and made some tea himself. Molly didn't suspect anything. She watched with delight at her husband eating his food and smiled. What reaction was she expecting? David's mind was full of thoughts. He even suspected that his wife went to a fortune teller and decided to bewitch him to make sure he wouldn't go anywhere. Or had she added some magical remedy to help him find a job? He did not believe his wife could have poisoned him. It seemed to him to be nonsense. They loved each other after all. The fact that he quit his job could not ruin their love. However, it was the first time in the last few days that David was not sleepy, and his wife kept asking him if he wanted to go to sleep. He realized that it was sleeping pills. He pretended to be tired, kissed his wife, and whispered in her ear, "Darling, there's something wrong with me lately. I'm so sleepy. Would you mind if I went to bed early?" Molly's face turned pleased for a second. Then she kissed her husband and said goodnight. David went to the bedroom and pretended to be asleep. His wife came into the room about 20 minutes later. She started saying something, making noise. She even turned on the light for a while to make sure that her husband was asleep. Then Molly got dressed and left the house. David didn't understand what was going on. Where had his wife been going all this time? Apparently, she sedated him so that he would sleep like a baby and she could leave the house. He felt uncomfortable thinking about it. When his wife left the house, David turned on his phone to make sure the tracking function was on, so he would be able to find out where Molly was. He got dressed quickly and rushed to follow her. Molly got in the cab, and David felt nervous. Where'd she been running off to at night, drugging her husband with sleeping pills? It had never happened before, had it? Usually, David remembered well how he fell asleep and woke up, but lately everything had changed. The man wondered. He had almost no memory of the previous week. His mind was so chaotic that it was hard to identify a single thought. David was hoping that his wife wouldn't open the tracking app and check to see where he was. He couldn't deactivate the tracking of his phone, because if he did, Molly would get a notification on her phone. Molly thought he was asleep. There was little chance she will guess that David is following her, but everything was possible. But David had no choice. Once in the car, he could hardly move. His hands were trembling and his thoughts were confused. Where could a young and beautiful woman go? Only to her lover. For some reason, David was sure that Molly was on her way to another man. He felt unwell at the thought. The cat stopped at the outskirts of the city. Molly got out of the car, opened the gate, and walked toward the house. The house looked poor. David thought that Molly's grandmother or grandfather might have lived in this house. She just never talked about them. But why didn't she tell him? Why would she hide the truth? For a while, the man didn't know what to do. He just sat in the car and couldn't make up his mind to go inside. David spent about an hour in the car trying to calm down and convince himself that his wife had no reason to deceive him. It was unlikely that she had a lover. Maybe she had a part-time job nursing someone there. And she didn't want to tell the truth because David wouldn't be happy about it. David liked that idea, and he clung to it like a drowning man to a life preserver. He felt guilty that his wife had to find a part-time job because of his lies. He decided to talk to his wife right now, no matter what. He would tell the truth and there would never be any more silly jokes, secrets, or lies between them. David got out of the car and walked into the yard. The house looked very old and shabby. It was hard to believe that his wife's lover could live in that house. If Molly had a lover, he would live in a luxurious mansion, right? All his thoughts turned into some incomprehensible muddle. Cautiously climbing up the old and rotten porch, David knocked on the door. No one opened it, so he had to knock harder. Was it a sect or something? Or a crack house? The last thought made the man feel nauseous. David immediately thought of Molly's frequent mood swings. What if she had started taking some kind of banned substances? He kept knocking on the door. Then he pushed the door a little harder and it opened. David got really scared when a skinny, plain-looking guy wearing nothing but his underpants ran out of the room. It didn't look like Molly was cheating on him. It really looked like a drug house. Shoving the guy aside and walking into the room, hoping to find his wife and stop her, David was shocked. Molly screamed and pulled the sheet over herself. She was lying in bed, naked. David couldn't believe his eyes. He clenched his hands into fists. She was cheating on him. There was a bottle of wine on the nightstand beside the bed. It was a bottle of wine that David had given to Molly, and there were 2 half-empty wine glasses on the table. Turning around to see the indignant guy who already had his pants on, David started laughing. All his anger suddenly turned into hysterical laughter. Had Molly really cheated on him with this guy? This guy looked ridiculous. Except it turned out it was David who looked ridiculous, considering his wife was cheating on him with this loser. "David, wait, I can explain." Molly cried out and started to get dressed in a hurry. But David turned around, walked out of the house, and got into the car. He accelerated and drove away from this godforsaken place. He couldn't believe that Molly cheated on him. She cheated on him with some loser, and that made David feel even worse. Maybe this guy really was good in bed. David was racing at a dangerous speed. He wanted to say goodbye to life, but soon enough, he realized something. Was Molly worth it? Is it worth committing suicide over such a worthless woman? Besides, if he had caused the accident, other people could have been hurt. David quickly came to his senses and slowed down. He drove around the city all night long. He came home in the morning and stayed in the car for a long time, hesitating to go into the house. He was not ready to look his lying wife in the eye. What made her take this step? Was she already at home? How could she look him in the eye after what she had done? How would he look at the woman he loved? During the day, she pretended to be a loving and caring wife, only to live in luxury. And every night she cheated on him with that loser. When David walked into the house, Molly was already there. She began to wail, saying that she had made a mistake. It turned out that she had dated Frank when she was still in high school. Their affair started half a year ago. Molly felt carefree with Frank, like she was in high school, and she could have fun without thinking about the consequences. She confessed that she was seeing Frank while her husband was away on a shift. And when he informed her that he had quit his job and there would be no more long trips, Molly was afraid there would be no more meetings with Frank. So she came up with this sophisticated way of sneaking out to see her lover. The woman said she loved her husband, and with Frank, they were just having sex. Molly screamed in tears that she was sorry and would never make such a mistake again, but David wouldn't listen to her. The man packed his bags and decided to go back to his apartment, which they wanted to sell and buy a summer house on the coast instead. He was glad that it didn't work out to sell the apartment. He did not want to stay at his wife's house, so he packed up and left. David did not say anything to Molly, but left in silence. He could not forgive. He couldn't get that disgusting scene in that shabby house out of his head. The fact of cheating didn't hurt him as much as the fact that she cheated on him with someone like Frank. The man called his boss and told him he was ready to return to work. When he filed for divorce, he asked Molly never to call or text him again. He didn't want to see this fallen woman again. 10 years passed. David took the position of chief and finally settled down in his hometown. The man found the strength to start a new relationship. His wife Corey cared for her husband and loved him, and they had a beautiful daughter. One day, David drove his wife to pick up some purchases in the neighborhood where he used to live with Molly. He was afraid to meet his ex-wife, but he did see his ex-wife. Molly walked with a stroller, and 2 other children walked beside her. Molly looked tired and old. The woman walked and humbly listened to Frank drunkenly yell at her. David felt sorry, but not for his ex-wife. He felt sorry for the children who were unlucky to be born to such parents. David thought of his daughter and decided to spend the evening with her. After waiting for Corey, he hurried to pick up his daughter, who was now with her grandmother. The man promised to take his girls to an amusement park, and then spend the whole evening at home, forgetting about all the problems and worries.